Good morning, my dear students, and welcome at your class on active and passive voice. So far, you have gone through 6 various rules regarding the active and passive voice. And in today's class, we are going to deal with the interrogative sentences. How the interrogative sentences are converted from active into passive voice. I hope so far you are clear with the topic called active and passive voice. And if there is no doubt, please kindly ask me and try to make your own examples and send me for correction. So we begin with the interrogative sentences. Rules regarding active and passive voice. So we'll be dealing with the interrogative sentences in the coming classes. So rule number 1. If the active voice starts with do or does are related to which tense? That is present tense. Use of is, are in the passive voice. Since these two are of present tense, do and does, we'll have to use the words like is, are in the passive voice. I'll give an example so that you will understand. Does he help you? So remember, in all these changes, the basic 4 changes will remain the same. Do not get confused that I don't explain here, because those 4 basic changes are meant for all the sentences. Does he help you? The sentence begins with the word called does. So according to the rule, we have to use is, or are depending on the subject of the passive voice. Now what is the subject in this particular passive voice? Are you helped by him? So the word called you. So what happens? We cannot use a word called is. We can use a word called am. So the only option that we have got is are. Are you helped by him? So remember, other changes are remaining the same. Subject becomes the object. Object becomes the subject. Past participle of the verb use of by. Since the sentence begins with the does, we are using the word called is, are. So depending on the subject, here it is you, so we have used the word called you. Are you helped by him? I hope you have understood the first one. Now moving on to the next one. Rule number 2. If the active voice starts with did, so did is meant for past tense. Use of was or were in the passive voice. Do and does meant for the present tense. Did meant for the past tense. So what happens? We have to use a word called was or were. So what happens? How does it work? Did he do this work? So what happens? The sentence begins with the word called did. So according to the rule, we have to use either was or were depending on the subject of the passive voice. So what is the subject here? That is this work. That is singular subject. So we have to use a word called was. Was this work done by him? Subject becomes the object. Object becomes the subject. Past participle of the verb. Use of by. Besides these 4 basic changes, we have used the word called was because the subject is singular. This work is a singular subject, so we have used the word called was. The reason for using was or were is that because the sentence begins with the word called did. So that is in past tense. So present tense we have do or does. So we have the words like is, are. Past tense we have got the word called did. So we have the words like was or were. Now moving on to the next one. If the active voice starts with is, are, or was, were. Rule number 3. That is rule number 3. If the active voice starts with is, are, was, or were, what happens? We have to use being plus past participle of the verb. Being plus past participle of the verb. So what happens here? Let's go through an example. Was she reading a novel? So the sentence begins with was. So remember, is, are, was, or were. The sentence begins with was. So according to the rule, we have to use being plus past participle in the passive voice. So remember which is subject. Subject is a novel, that is singular subject. Was a novel being read? Read is past participle by her. So remember, being plus past participle of the verb. Was a novel being read by her? So that's an S rule. And when the active voice starts with is, am, are, was or were, when you convert into passive voice, it becomes being plus past participle of the verb. Being is the additional word because additional word, past participle, that is a common basic change that you'll have to always do it. I hope you have clear with these three rules. Once again, let's go through these three rules. I don't like to rush through the topic. Let's go through rule number 1 once again. That is rule number 1. If the active voice starts with do or does, that is present tense, is, am, are. So see the subject and use is, am or are in the passive voice. The basic changes will remain the same. I don't like to explain here now. Like subject becomes the object, object becomes the subject, past participle of the verb, use of by. So what happens here is, that is rule number 1. And does he help you? Are you helped by him? Now coming to rule number 2. The active voice starts with did. Did is in past tense, so we have the words like was or were. Okay. So did he do this work? Was this work done by him? Remember past tense. The last one it is rule number 3 that we have learned. The active voice starts with, if the active voice starts with is, am, are, was or were, being plus past participle of the verb. Was she reading a novel? Was a novel being read by her? I hope you have understood these three rules regarding the interrogative sentences in active and passive voice. So can you go through the notes once again, and we'll continue with the same topic in the coming classes also. So thank you. Continue to study well.